Welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. So we're just on the couch, watching MasterChef, like usual. She'd taken her medication, so I knew she was probably going to go to bed soon. After the episode, she did her usual door checks to make sure everything was locked and stuff. She can't go to bed without making sure everything is shut/locked, i.e. windows, doors, all that. And then I followed her to the bedroom to lay with her for a little bit while she fell asleep. Not 15 seconds into laying there with her, we hear absolutely clear as day, this clacking sound coming from my kitchen. It was loud. I could hear it with my bedroom door closed. It honestly sounded like something with some real weight was walking around my kitchen. So I lock my bedroom door, she calls her friend, and we just hear this thing walking around my house. After 2 to 3 minutes, it just stops. I tentatively go out of the bedroom, look around my entire house. Empty. Door is locked. Every window shut. I have no clue what happened, but that was the strangest thing I have ever experienced in my life. Story 2. This happened a few months ago. In early January, my wife and I were in the kitchen, prepping lunch and chatting. Our 5-year-old daughter was in the living room, watching TV. No one else in the house. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and the layout of the house allows us to see a bit of the corridor and hallway outside the kitchen door. My wife was cutting up food, and I was sitting behind her. As we talked, she started to turn around to face me but stopped midway, staring at the kitchen door. She froze up completely, and I remember asking, "What is it?" She let out a loud gasp, and then I instinctively looked toward the door as well. I saw a brief glimpse of what seemed like a person turning the corner, towards the living room. It happened very fast, but I was sure I saw someone. I panicked. My immediate thought was, holy fuck, someone broke in, my daughter's alone in the living room. The only thing I thought of doing was grabbing a knife, and yelled at my wife to call the police. I rushed into the corridor and into the living room. In the living room, there was nothing. My kid was just sitting on the couch, watching Bluey. She looked at me and asked, "What's up?" with a confused expression. Mind you, I had a knife in my hand, and probably looked crazy. I tried to play it off and asked if she saw anyone come in the room. She hadn't and was clueless about what I was talking about. I searched the living room and the rest of the house. No sign of a break-in, windows closed, and we live on the 3rd floor. If someone had tried to escape that way, they would have fallen really bad. I checked everywhere, wardrobes, behind curtains, the front door. Nothing. No signs of entry, and the front door was totally closed, and we didn't hear anyone come in or anything of the sort. This all happened within maybe 10 minutes. I went back to the kitchen where my wife was crying. She had frozen up and didn't call the cops. I calmed her down. She got scared bad, and she couldn't even speak properly. When she calmed down, she explained to me what she saw. I personally only caught a very quick glimpse of the thing turning around the corner. However, my wife says she got a good look at it. She says she saw what looked like a tall woman, dressed in a floral dress and high heels, walking across the corridor. Neither of us heard any sound though. She said the woman stopped when she understood she was seen, looked at my wife in the eyes, and my wife swears the figure looked like our daughter, but older. This happened in the space of seconds, when she first froze up in shock. When my wife gasped, the woman hurried and turned the corner into the living room. I only saw this last part. If I hadn't caught a glimpse of it, I would ask my wife to go into therapy or something. But I know something was there. We never figured out what we saw, but it was definitely the strangest moment of my life, and I know it happened. Wanted to share here. Story 3. I know this story is going to sound weird and crazy, but hear me out. I'm not too familiar with this subreddit, but a friend of mine who's always talking about metaphysics, Twilight Zone, simulation type stuff loves this sub, and keeps telling me to post this. In fact, no doubt he'll read this. Hey Zane LOL. Anyways, here's my story. 2 weeks ago, I was about to get ready for a party at 6. Just before I started getting ready, one of my friends messaged me, super excited because a boy she's had a crush on for the last 4 years finally asked her out, and he was coming with her to the party. While I was texting her back, my younger brother walked into my room and asked if I could drive him to his friend's house, which I agreed to do. Then I went to the bathroom to have a shower and do my makeup. So I got in the shower, but when I went to wash my hair I realized that my conditioner was finished. I was pretty ticked off because I'd only bought it a couple of days beforehand, and it's an expensive brand. My younger sister always uses up my things, so I knew she'd used it all. She'd also trashed the bathroom, leaving water everywhere and her dirty towel on the floor. I was pissed off, and was about to get out of the shower in order to tell her off and get some more conditioner. But as I went to get out, I realized at the last second that she'd kicked the grippy mat we have at the bottom of our shower tub up. Our shower/tub is super slippery without the grip mat. So as I went to step out, my foot slipped, and I fell with my neck down onto the edge of my tub. Time seemed to slow down in my head, and I remember my last thought was, wow, this is how I die. How stupid. But here's the thing, at the moment of impact, I woke up in a start back in my bed. I know it sounds stupid and cheesy, like something from a dumb Netflix show, but there's literally no other way to describe what happened. I was lying in bed right before I got up to shower the first time, but I don't remember falling asleep. And the thing is, I've been a lucid dreamer for the last 5 or so years, and if this was a dream, it was way more vivid than anything I've ever experienced. What weirded me out, though, was that the exact same friend who texted me the first time messaged me after I woke up to tell me that the boy she had a crush on had asked another girl out, and she was pretty bummed about it and didn't want to come to the party. I was weirded out that there was some similarity between that and the dream, but didn't think much of it at first. As I went to reply, my younger brother came in to ask if I would take him to his friend's house. All the blood drained from my face. He just stood in the doorway looking confused, and asked me what was wrong. I rushed into the bathroom, feeling like I was losing my fucking mind, and went to check the conditioner bottle. I know this sounds completely crazy, but the bottle was finished just like before, and the grip mat was kicked up. At that point, I went to lie back down in bed, and texted my friends to tell them that I wouldn't be going to the party. Story 4. I was 17 years old at the time, still in that awkward in-between stage where you think you're grown, but you're really not. My dad and I had just wrapped up one of our regular fishing trips. It was late, almost midnight, and the air had that sharp mid-fall chill that sneaks into your bones once the sun disappears. The lake was quiet, the kind of quiet that only happens when everyone else has gone home hours ago. I remember the crunch of leaves under our boots as we made our way back to the car, the mist of our breath floating in the dark, and the faint smell of damp earth and lake water clinging to our clothes. When we got to the car, I reached for the passenger side door, ready to collapse into the seat after a long day. That's when my dad suddenly stopped me. His voice was calm but firm, almost strange. He told me he didn't want me sitting in the front seat for the ride home. I laughed at first, thought he was joking, but he wasn't smiling. I asked him why now, why tonight, why something so random. He didn't give me a reason that made sense. He just shook his head and said, "Just get in the back." That turned into an argument, like most things between teenagers and parents do. I pushed back, telling him it was ridiculous, that I wasn't a little kid. We went back and forth for 5 minutes, me rolling my eyes and him refusing to explain himself. The more he insisted, the more annoyed I got. Finally, I gave up. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way his voice carried something I couldn't place, something heavier than usual. I sighed and slid into the back seat, muttering under my breath the whole time. The night was pitch black as we pulled out onto the main road. No streetlights, just the headlights cutting through the dark. It felt eerie, like we were the only ones awake in the world. We had been driving maybe 2 minutes, not even far enough for me to settle into the seat, when it happened. I saw it at the same time he did, a pair of headlights dead ahead, coming straight toward us in our lane. Time seemed to slow down, stretching into this horrible silence. I remember the sickening certainty in my stomach. We were going to collide. At the very last moment, my dad swerved hard into the opposite lane, and unbelievably, the other driver swerved too, straight into us. The impact was violent, louder than anything I'd ever heard, metal screaming against metal. I remember my dad gripping the wheel, his knuckles white, his voice low and steady as he muttered, "I knew it." Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, flashing red and blue lights painted the trees around us. My ears were ringing, my vision blurry. Police officers were everywhere, voices overlapping in urgent tones. Someone pulled open the door and carefully helped me out. My legs felt like they weren't mine, and my body was heavy, as if gravity had doubled. I was barely conscious, fading in and out, and most of what happened next is still a blur. But one thing I remember with absolute clarity, as if it's burned into me forever, is seeing my dad. He was still sitting in the car, looking at me. His eyes were wet with tears, and he lifted a hand to wave at me. It wasn't frantic, it was gentle, almost like a goodbye. That image has never left me. Later, when I was stable enough to ask questions, I found out the truth. My dad hadn't been sitting in the car after all. The crash had thrown him through the windshield, and he had landed just a few feet from the vehicle. He had been alive for a short while after, but he passed away in the ambulance. The man driving the other car died instantly on impact. And in the back seat of his car was his own 17-year-old daughter. She survived, just like I did. Two families changed forever in a single moment. It's been 6 years since that night, and I still replay it in my mind more often than I'd like to admit. I think about that strange moment in the parking lot, my dad insisting I sit in the back seat. I'll never understand how he knew, or why he pushed so hard when he usually would have just let me be stubborn. I think about the wave, about the tears in his eyes. Sometimes I wonder if it was real, or if it was just my mind trying to make sense of something I can't. Story 5. This technically happened last night, but I was just starting a graveyard shift, and am only now getting it all down. I work at a gas station chain with only numbers in its name. We're just outside of a large chunk of suburbs. None if that middle of nowhere. Like we aren't exactly near any other businesses, but we are rarely completely dead for hours at a time. It was just past midnight, and with everything going on in the US, right now not a lot of things other than gas stations and bars are open at night anymore, so it was a slower evening. I was the only one in the store, and a car pulled up to one of the two double-sided pumps out front. Pretty standard white four-door. I'm not great with car brands, but it was a little nicer, like upper middle class, and probably only a few years old. A woman gets out and starts walking towards our door like she's in a daze. Legit, this woman looked like she saw a ghost. She wanders up, sort of freezes at the door for a second with a 1,000-yard stare before opening it and coming in. She didn't go looking for anything, didn't start shopping, just sort of stood inside for what felt like ages. Again, bars are still open, so I think maybe she's a little drunk or had a rough night or something. So I give the usual, welcome to gas station. Let me know if you need any help finding anything. And she finally notices me and immediately asks me the weirdest damn question I have ever been asked on the job. You can see me, right? Yeah. Like what else do you say? She breaks down crying in the middle of my store, so I'm already headed around the corner to see what's up. I have my cell phone out in case I need to call the cops or something for her. I get her to sit down on a nearby pallet of soda, and I'm grabbing her a bottle of water, and after she catches her breath a little she tells me, I thought I had died. Again I'm thinking maybe she is on something, but she's a middle-aged woman who looks like a standard local suburban housewife. We're a pretty boring township without your average junkies like you'd find closer to the cities. So she asks if she can call her husband to pick her up and wait with me. She has her own phone and does so, not really telling him anything either, just where she is at and if he can come get her. He says he'll call an Uber and be there as soon as possible. We're waiting. So far nobody else has showed up, so I'm keeping most of my attention on her, and eventually she starts to explain to me. I was driving home from dinner with my co-workers, and as I'm driving through nearby intersection I recognized. A truck ran a red light and hit me. Now her car is still at the pump without a scratch on it. She goes on to say she remembers her car being pushed into a pole, going airborne, and then nothing. I tried to calm her down, letting her know that her car is out front and it looks fine, but she insisted that she completely blacked out, woke up in an ambulance for a split second, passed out again, and then woke up again in the driver's seat of her car, at the intersection waiting for the light to change, perfectly fine. This whole thing freaked her out so badly that she drove to the nearest anything, us, just so she could get out of the car. Husband eventually showed up to get her. He asked if I had any idea what happened, and even though she sort of explained to me, I just shrugged because no, I had no idea what was happening anymore. She reluctantly got into the passenger seat of the car, and he drove them back home. That was hours ago, after which I worked an entire shift at the station, trying to wrap my head around what the absolute hell I had just witnessed. Story 6. This is a topic that has questioned my sanity and haunted me for years and years. I've been seeing the same man since I was in my late teens. I'm 38 years old now. I started seeing him in random places around the age of 17. I live in a heavily populated area, and I have lived all over the tri-state area. I've seen him in parking lots, I've seen him in stores, I've seen him at events. But the craziest one was I saw him at a destination wedding in St. Martin about 10 years ago. I approached him at the wedding and asked him if he has been following me for years because I see him all over the place. As you can imagine, the conversation immediately became one of the awkwardest ones I've ever been a part of. He kind of laughed and shrugged it off, but I could tell he knew he was seeing me all over the place also. There's been spans of over a year to 2 years where I don't see him whatsoever, and it seems like it comes in waves. My life has changed considerably, as you can imagine, since the age of 17. I now have a wife and a child. My most recent sightings of the guy, was in a store called Bye Bye Baby. I was buying things for my newborn. Within the same month, I saw him in a Home Depot about 30 miles away. Every time this happens, he pretends like he doesn't see me, but I can tell he's as sketched out as I am. The last sighting of this guy was a couple months ago in the store for baby stuff, and that was the final straw. I'm telling you, if I see this guy again, I am going to get to the bottom of it. I don't even care what it takes. It's something I've pondered over for so long, and like I said, I question my own sanity. I'm also a male. For frame of reference, and the guy that I've been seeing is a lot older than me, but it seems like he hasn't aged a bit, as crazy as that sounds. Like I said, I know the man is real. I've talked to him face to face. But that still doesn't make me question my own sanity. Story 7. I've never used Reddit before, but a friend of mine was talking to me about the glitch in the Matrix subreddit, so I decided to share my story here, since I don't have any explanation for it almost 3 years later. Rewind back to September 2015. I was a freshman who had just entered high school 2 weeks prior. Already school was weighing down on me, and I'd been continuing a habit I had of going on walks to clear my mind. On this day, I'd been walking around a pond near my house. There's a trail that goes around the pond, and then the trail leads up to a set of abandoned train tracks on the other side, which sit about 15 feet above the path and pond below. After walking the circle, I was crossing the train tracks when I decided I wanted some ice cream. The fastest way to get to the ice cream shop was to take the path below the train tracks, but there isn't any way to cross the pond without going all the way back around, and being 14 years old, I decided that I could just jump from the tracks onto the path below and keep walking. Looking down from above, it didn't seem to be that far of a jump, so that's what I did. The next thing I remember after that was being half-conscious in an ambulance. Everything was extremely blurry, and the paramedics sounded slightly panicked. I wasn't able to move either of my legs, so I think they were both broken. This scene continued on for a few minutes, until we arrived at the hospital, and I was wheeled into the emergency room on a stretcher. I only had a few minutes in emergency before I eventually lost all consciousness, and that was the last thing I saw. After I'd been unconscious for what felt like about an hour, I opened my eyes and I was on the ground. I just hit the ground after jumping, but this time I was fully conscious. I hadn't noticed this before I jumped, but there had been a car parked watching me. I think they thought I was attempting suicide, but it probably looked that way, and the people in it had jumped out and called an ambulance for me. The ambulance ride had been the exact same as it was the first time, and I was put into the same emergency room that I had died in before. The only difference between the two events were that I was fully conscious this time, and my injuries were much more minor. I was discharged from the hospital the same night, with only stitches in my lip, a slightly fractured jaw, and a mild concussion. For a while after this, I assumed that the first scenario had just been a weirdly coincidental dream that I'd had while I was unconscious, so I didn't consider it anything abnormal. It wasn't until a few weeks after, when my mom told me that the people who had helped me said that I had been conscious the entire time. I hadn't been knocked out after hitting the ground or anything. So, that entire scenario managed to happen in the few seconds it took for me to hit the ground, while I was still conscious. Anyways, I'm not very good at describing things, especially with how blurry this day was now that it was years ago. But I'm 17 now, and I still have no way to explain what happened that day, other than I died, and was given a second chance. Story 8. I am sorry if this is the wrong place to post this. Mandela Effect doesn't allow personal stories, only stuff with proof. This is going to be long. This Wednesday, February 5th, on the way to work, I went to my usual gas station. I go there every day, 5 days a week. I go in and everything is different. All new drink stations have been installed, and the food area is completely redone. None of this was different Tuesday morning, and I couldn't believe that they'd redone a gas station in one night. I then go outside and see that 2 gas pumps are completely gone, and there is mulch bags stacked taking up all the space. None of this was there the day before. I then leave and head to work and somehow turn on the wrong street and get lost. I've been driving these neighborhoods for months, and suddenly I'm lost trying to find my job. I get to work a few minutes later, and I'm panicking. I know it's silly, but I've always feared changing timelines. My fiancé and I have a timeline-safe word, so we know we are together. I call and ask him, and he has no idea what I'm talking about. We just talked about it at the end of January, and we've had it established for a while. I've even woken him up at night and asked him after having a nightmare, and he's known. But now he has no idea what I'm talking about. Then the girls start coming downstairs. I work in an addictions group home, and one girl keeps saying how confused she is and how nothing makes sense today. Later in the day, another kept saying all she wanted to do was cry, and she had no idea why. Then while running errands, I go down the same street I always do, and suddenly there are 4 houses gone and a grove of trees planted. I've never seen them before and really started freaking. They are next to a building my family owned for the last 20 years. I know the whole neighborhood. My final straw was calling my mom today. She said my sister was going out tonight with her friend Jenna. I have known Jenna since 2003. I asked how much longer until Jenna has her baby. My mom goes silent and asks what the heck I'm talking about. She says she's never been pregnant. I look her up online, nothing. I asked my sister just a half hour ago, and she laughs in my face and says Jenna is infertile and will never have kids. I literally remember the day my sister told me she was pregnant. She told me to guess who, and Jenna was my third guess. What the hell is happening to my life? Update for you all. I really appreciate all the support and kind words people have had for me. This whole experience has been very scary for me. As for a few questions people have had, it's getting hard to keep up. I'm going to answer them here. I have already taken an extensive online schizophrenia test on Friday night. It said that I'm fine and very low probability of it. As for CO2 poisoning, I have no gas in my home or the home I work in. Everything is electric. I opened up to my fiancé and had him read this. He knew it had happened, but didn't know how upset I was. I asked him if I had shown any signs of mental instability or Alzheimer's. I'm only 25, and he said I've never shown any signs and only some mild anxiety when things get crazy. Lastly, the safe word and things leading up to the day. We created the safe word mostly as a joke after I read the Berenstein Bears theory, and I had a really weird day at my old job. It became more used when I'd have nightmares and when I made jokes. The day before was a normal Tuesday. Wake up, work, home, eat, sleep. The only strange thing about the day was that I thought I'd heard a scream or yell as I was falling asleep. I blew it off and still kind of blow it off as some sort of sleep paralysis or dreamy moment. Story 9. A few years ago, when my daughter was 3, I decided to go back to school and become a nurse. My husband and I were in no way trying for a baby whatsoever. I was on birth control, and we were very careful. I walk into her preschool one day to find the director and her teachers telling me congratulations with big smiles on their faces. I used to work as a preschool teacher here, so a lot of these people were close friends of mine. I asked them what they're congratulating me for, and they tell me that my daughter announced to everyone that Mommy has a little sister in her tummy. I laughed it off and told them all I was sorry to disappoint them, but that just wasn't true. My daughter and I went home and talked about it. I told her Mommy didn't have a baby in her tummy, and she just kept pointing at my belly and saying, "Yes, you do," as if I were lying to her. A few days later, I wake up to someone touching my belly. My daughter has the bottom of my shirt pulled up with her head resting on my belly while she rubs it gently and says, "Baby sister, what are you doing hiding in there?" It was really sweet, and I just assumed she really wanted a little sister. She had never expressed any interest in having a sibling prior to this, and we never discussed it. We had the talk again, and she got upset with me and told me she has seen her before, and she is in there. She told me that her sister looks different and than us and has blonde hair and blue eyes with little holes in her cheeks, aka dimples. My daughter, husband and I all have very dark hair, chocolate brown eyes, and no dimples. I talk to her about wanting a sibling and tell her that when I finish school, we will try to give her a little brother or sister. Again, she's frustrated and yelling, "I already have a sister." I was expecting my period to start within the next week like clockwork. It didn't. I took a pregnancy test and just stared at that faint positive result for what felt like forever. I was completely in shock. I was on birth control, so immediately called my OBGYN, and they saw me the next day. It was estimated that I was 4 weeks and 6 days pregnant. I gave birth to a blonde-hair, blue-eyed little girl with the sweetest dimples. This experience has always blown my mind. Story 10. I don't know if it is suitable for this sub, but still here it is. The year was 2011. I was in med school, while my brother joined engineering college in same city. That my brother is 3 years younger to me. One day I asked him to come to my hostel, as it was his free day from college. He used to come in his free day as he missed family. We were chatting and having foods while he suddenly asked me about a girl. Convo. "Bro, do you remember Nisha, altered name for obvious reason?" "Me Nisha who?" "Bro, it seems like you have forgotten her. Good for you." Me, visibly confused. "Which Nisha you are talking about?" "Bro, still playing. Don't try so hard, brother. that you know exactly about whom I am taking about. Leave it if that's still hurting you, that I shouldn't have bring her up. Me, thinking that he is pulling my leg, I started to play along. Yeah, I remembered that I forgot her, that it was bitter that I am not in touch with her. Bro, it is not like that you can be in touch with her anyway. Me trying to play along. Yeah, that she is probably married by now. Bro, visibly confused. Now what Nisha are you talking about? Me exactly the Nisha you are talking about. Bro, leave it then. Mia. After 30 or so minutes after lunch is over. Bro, do you really not remember her? Nisha? Me, tired of this game, agitated. Bro, stop this game, it's not funny anymore, that I am tired of this stupid game. Bro, what game? Me, I don't really know Nisha. Who is she? Bro, forget it. And he left for the day. I asked Mom after few days about Nisha. She was distraught when I asked about her. After few mon she told me that she was my GF while I was in school. She was my brother's best friend. She died in a car accident few years back. I was dumbfounded that I don't even recall her name, face, memory. Nothing. Her memory is totally wiped out from me. I was disturbed and went back to home where Mom showed me a pic where I was with a girl, and my brother, that I don't even remember the girl. In some cases of PTSD, selective amnesia happens. But that repressed memory can be triggered by related memory. But in this case, I didn't even recall her. I was agitated because I don't remember her. Till this day, I don't recall anything. According to family, we were close. I didn't try to ask her family or any other people because it seems insensitive. Story 11. We were all completely sober. Quick preface. I'm currently driving home from my lunch break, so I'm using Siri to talk. Hopefully this makes sense. So back in the summer, we had a huge friend trip to Lake Powell. For anyone that has been there, you know it's absolutely beautiful. Anyways, we were boating through the canyons and going deeper and deeper into the canyons. Lake Powell. At one point I thought in my mind something along the lines of, damn, this place is so beautiful it almost looks fake, or like it was designed to look this way by something. When I started saying that in my mind, a friend turned around to me and said, dude, it feels like we're in a movie and we are looking at movie props. It looks so fake. And I turned around and looked and said, dude, what the fuck did you just say? I was thinking the exact same thing. We were both freaking out about it, but then it got a little freakier. We were sitting at the back of the boat looking at our 10 or so friends standing up while the boat was slowly going through the canyons, and as I watched them looking at the scenery, I experienced an altered state of conscience. The best way to describe it is the facade of the human experience was dropped, and all of a sudden my friends looked like gods or angelic beings experiencing Earth and just enjoying the moment. My friend turned to me and said, dude, look at our friends, they're so beautiful and alive, they look like angels. And I knew at that moment we were both experiencing the same thing. The best way to describe what we saw is it looked like we placed ourselves in a video game and were enjoying what we created. It's super hard to describe this experience. If you've seen Maze Runner, you know how they make you forget everything before you go into the maze, but yet you had an existence before? It felt like that. That nature of reality teased us and slightly withdrew, and we saw our friends and this earth for what it could truly be for a brief moment in time. Story 12. This all happened about 7 or 8 years ago, on a night that started like any other and ended up lodged in my memory like a splinter. My husband, Chris, and I were lying in bed watching television, the kind of low-key evening after the kids were asleep, the glow of the screen painting our ceiling in slow-moving images. The room smelled faintly of detergent and baby lotion. The window was cracked a little, and a cold whisper of autumn air threaded through the curtains. I was half listening to the show when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small figure standing in the doorway. At first I thought it was our son, Connor. He was the only child we had at the time, and he loved to sneak into rooms to try and scare us with huge, exaggerated faces. I nudged Chris with my elbow, quiet as a cat. Hey, SHHH, look. I think Connor's going to try to scare us. He turned his head slowly, squinting in the dim light, and watched as the child stepped into the room. That moment felt different from the start. It wasn't the familiar stealthy swagger of our kid trying to be funny. It was a kind of small, solemn entrance, like a tiny statue come to life. The child toddled forward with a peculiar rhythm, head slightly tilted back, curls bouncing with each step, little diapered legs making that soft squish-squish sound that only babies make when they move. He went all the way to the end of our bed, hesitated, and then his head dropped forward, almost as if he were looking down at something invisible on the floor. Chris and I watched in silence, riveted and a little breathless. There was no chortle, no boo. Nothing to break the hush. I felt the hair on my arms rise. Then, when we both moved to stand up and get a closer look, he was gone. Just like that, empty air where a small body had been. I looked at Chris, and our startled voices were a single thin thread. Did we just see a ghost? I blurted out before I could stop myself. The absurdity of the question hit me immediately, and almost as an afterthought, I added with a nervous laugh, "Well, if we have another baby someday and he has curls, I guess that means he visited before he was born." We both cracked up at the ridiculousness of that thought. We weren't even trying for another baby, but the laughter had an edge of something like wonder in it. Curiosity overrode fear. We crept down the hall to check on Connor. He was curled up in his bed, breath soft and regular, entirely asleep. Nothing in his room indicated he'd been wandering. We double-checked the house, the kitchen light, the back door, and everything was exactly where we'd left it. There was no plausible explanation except that we had both just seen a child who did not belong to us. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. The surprise hit like a wave. We had not been trying, and yet there it was, a small, impossible new life growing inside me. When our son Liam was born and reached 2 years old, that offhand, half-joking thought from the night years before came roaring back into focus in a way I could never have anticipated. Liam had the same little tilt to his head when he walked, the same ringlets that bobbed when he moved. One night, he toddled into our bedroom in the dark, hair bouncing, and for a split second the world folded. The image was identical. Head tipped back, curls catching the weak light, the diaper making a soft, rhythmic squish with each step. I remember the exact sensation, like a bucket of cold water poured over my chest, as my mind slammed into the realization. This was the child who had stood in our doorway all those years ago. There was no doubt in my mind. It was the same mannerism, the same small gait that had seemed so odd when I'd seen it the first time. I felt a jolt of something that was part awe and part grief, because suddenly that strange, quiet visitation had meaning. If the thing we'd seen before Liam was born was some kind of visitor, a presence that could come and go between rooms and times, then it had come to see me again. From that point on, visits became a pattern. Whenever Liam stayed elsewhere, with my parents, grandparents, anyone, he would sometimes visit me in my sleep. Once, I woke from a nap to find a small, smiling face hovering at the edge of my dream. He stood there in a tiny red shirt, hair cut short, just smiling at me like he was proud of whatever secret mission had brought him to my room. I blinked and felt the warmth of him, the small weight of his presence, and then I drifted off again. The next day, when I went to pick him up from my mother's, everything lined up in a way that made my hair stand on end. He had a neat, freshly shorn haircut, and on his chest was that same little red shirt. I asked my mom, the words tumbling out of me, "Did he wear this yesterday?" She looked at me with a half grin and a shrug and said, "Oh yeah, he did, but he insisted on wearing it today too." I watched my son carefully. He looked at me, eyes wide and candid, and I asked him as casually as I could, "Did you go see Mama yesterday?" He cocked his head in that same way, and when he smiled up at me, something in the back of my chest unclenched. He might have just been a toddler doing toddler things, repeating words, wearing the same shirt twice, but the certainty pulsing through me was undeniable. I don't have a tidy explanation for what we saw that night. I don't know whether it was some sort of premonition, a guardian-like presence, or something else entirely. All I know is that the sightings were real to me, and they threaded through our lives like a quiet, inexplicable stitch. Whether it was spiritual, supernatural, or some strange coincidence that tied behavior and appearance together across years, it changed the way I noticed small things. The tilt of a head, the bounce of a curl, the comfort of a familiar presence in a room. Story 1. I'd been riding the tail end of a lean month. Hours cut, payday still a dot on the horizon, and I was down to a few pantry survivors and a package of ground beef in the fridge. Dinner would have to be improvised. Taco pasta, maybe. Franken meal. Don't judge me. I got the beef going in a skillet with my DIY taco blend. Paprika, cumin, garlic powder, chili, cracked pepper. The scent lifted from the pan, coppery and warm, promising comfort. I set water to boil and reached into the pasta cupboard, already bracing myself for the dusty elbow macaroni I was sure was hiding at the back. Instead, my hand came out holding a bag that didn't belong to this timeline. Egg noodles. Burkle stamped in big, confident letters. Everything else in German. No bilingual French-English label, no nutrition facts in that neat little Canadian grid. The plastic had that matte, papery feel you don't get on store-brand stuff. There was even a tiny printed suggestion, At least I think it was a suggestion, with a cartoon pot and a smiling spoon. Zero English anywhere, like the package had slipped across a border while the universe blinked. I just stood there, one fist around the bag like I'd caught a fucking relic. My heart went tripwire fast. I live alone. No one had been over. I ordered groceries online, because I hate the fluorescent purgatory of supermarket aisles. My app history? Nothing. I searched the store catalog before. No Burkle, no German egg noodles, no surprise the broke guy category. But there it was in my hand, a grinning stranger of a carb. I pictured an alternate version of me, slimmer, better haircut, definitely owns a proper pasta pot, strolling through a Berlin specialty shop thinking, you know what future me in Canada needs? Noodles. Maybe he tucked the bag into his backpack, hopped a train, and somewhere between our timelines the zipper teeth became the cogs of a cosmic gear, and the bag fell into my cupboard. Or some benevolent kitchen god said, he must eat, and booped the Burkle into place with a celestial finger. I know it sounds ridiculous, but so is finding contraband pasta in your cupboard like a fucking haunted housewarming gift. The water reached a rolling boil, an impatient roar, and I realized I was still clutching the bag, half expecting it to dissolve into mist. I flipped it over. Instructions I couldn't read. A little map icon? Or a factory? Maybe it was secretly a recall notice. Warning: do not cook interdimensional egg pasta without proper wards. Side effects may include nosebleeds, déjà vu, and becoming your own neighbor. I cut it open anyway. Desperation is a bully, and hunger's a gossip. Between them, my better judgment didn't stand a chance. The noodles slid out with a chalky whisper. They looked normal, a bit paler than I'm used to, with edges that seemed too tidy, like they'd been outlined with a razor-thin pencil. I dumped them into the pot, and the sound, like dry leaves kissing steam, gave me a quick shiver. I told myself to quit being dramatic. People eat stranger things than orphan German noodles. While they cooked, I stirred the beef, added a splash of water, and my spice mix. The cumin opened like a warm door. I tossed in a handful of frozen corn and a spoonful of tomato paste I found hiding in the fridge door like a guilty secret. The noodles softened faster than I expected. I fished one out with a spoon, blew on it, tasted. It was fine. Good even. Slightly eggshell sweet, tender without going gummy. Nothing exploded. Nothing whispered my name from inside the pot. Okay. I drained them, the steam clouding up my glasses, then married noodles to beef in the skillet. The sizzle sounded perfectly, gloriously normal. I plated up, sprinkled some stale cheddar shards I scraped from a bag corner, and sat at my tiny kitchen table, which wobbles unless you threaten it. First bite, savory, comforting, familiar enough to make my shoulders drop. Second bite, I noticed a faint, clean taste, like spring water. Third bite, I swore the noodles had a texture I couldn't place, like they yielded in 3 distinct steps instead of one. Not soft, more like soft, then a delicate give, then a final hush, as if they remembered being dough a second longer than they should. I ate the whole goddamn plate. And then the worry crawled back. What if there were rules on that package? Boil no longer than 7 minutes, or risk inviting a doppelganger. Consume before midnight, lest you wake speaking in umlauts. I checked my phone for a translation app, then remembered my data was throttled to dial-up speed, because I'd been streaming comfort shows like a man avoiding real life. I just sat there, fork in hand, listening to the building settle, to my fridge hum, to a wind that suddenly sounded like it was reading a list. The silence in my apartment had a new shape. I went back to the cupboard. No second bag. No hidden trapdoor behind the cereal. I opened the grocery app. Searched Burkle, egg noodles, German, weird. Nothing. I scrolled my order history anyway, as if the past might edit itself to make me sane. It didn't. I took the empty bag to my desk like a detective with a single clue. I Googled the brand on my throttled connection. Found a few German sites that made my browser feel shy. I recognized a couple of words: Eier, Qualitat, Herkunft. Enough high school German to know. Egg quality origin. No shipping to Canada. No English pages. The reality felt like it was grinning. And that's when the loneliness hit. Not the dramatic kind. The mundane, petty kind that sneaks in at the edges of your day. The kind where you want to text someone a photo of a stupid pasta bag and say, "Explain this shit," and they send back 20 laughing emojis and then call you, voice warm, kitchen clattering in the background. The kind where someone else's breath lives in the room. I put the bag down and laughed, a single stupid bark. Maybe I manifested it, I said to no one. I'd told myself before that the universe sometimes nudges. Once a parking spot appeared like a magic trick. Another time, a lost keychain turned up in a shoe I'd already checked. Small, almost rude miracles. Why not a bag of noodles for a broke idiot who just needed to eat? I washed the skillet, wiped the counter, and tucked the empty Burkle bag into the drawer where I keep batteries and birthday candles and things that matter for no reason. A shrine to stray timelines. Story 2. The mid-90s in rural Mexico wasn't exactly a playground for kids. My cousins and I spent our summers in a small town, so remote it felt like time had paused. No plumbing, no proper streets, just outhouses in the backyards and dirt roads that carried the smell of dust long after a car or donkey cart passed through. The evenings were slow, sometimes unbearable in their quiet, so we made our own entertainment, stories, gossip, daring each other to wander closer to the mountains after dark. One night, after hanging out at a buddy's family store, the conversation turned to a man everyone in town seemed to whisper about. He was old, late 60s, maybe older, and he lived alone on his property. No wife, no children, no visitors. My cousin said he once told him that he could escape his enemies by disappearing, that they'd trample over him, hurting him, but never find him. He'd grin when he said it, like it was some private joke. The man already had a reputation. Some called him a brujo, a warlock. Others whispered he was cursed. He never joined town gatherings, never lingered at the market, never sat in the plaza. Just an old man in an adobe house with cracked walls and an overgrown yard, carrying an aura that felt wrong. That night we sat in the shuttered store, huddled together as my cousin swore up and down the man knew black magic. Some of us laughed nervously, others leaned in closer, as if we were daring the shadows themselves to lean back. By the time we finally left, the air outside was cool and empty. The road stretched quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel under our shoes. That's when we saw him. His adobe wall was maybe 6 feet tall, too high for a man his age to peer over naturally. But there he was, his head and shoulders above it, leaning awkwardly as though standing on a chair. He was staring straight at us, a grotesque smile splitting his face from ear to ear, his head bobbing in an unsettling rhythm. It wasn't just a look, it was acknowledgement, like he knew exactly what we'd been saying about him inside the store. Every hair on my body stood up. My cousins froze. Nobody made a joke this time. We just walked faster, the sound of our own feet suddenly deafening on the dirt road. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes pressing against my spine until we turned the corner. For years I dismissed it as a creepy old man playing a trick, but the memory refuses to sit still. His words about disappearing, his uncanny smile, the timing, appearing right after we spoke of him. Now I think about the folklore I grew up with, witches that turn into owls, people who walk between forms. Skinwalkers, though we didn't use that word. And I wonder, did we witness black magic that night? Or did black magic witness us? Story 3. I was still in primary school, a kid with no real worries beyond homework and which Lego set I was building that week. A few days after Christmas, I was on the carpet in my bedroom, surrounded by bricks and minifigures, completely lost in play. The hallway outside my room glowed faintly yellow from the light above the stairs. From my angle on the floor, I could see the banister and part of the wall beyond the doorframe. It was ordinary safe. Nothing about that evening suggested I was about to see something I'd never forget. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. My eyes were glued to the Lego fortress I was building. But a flicker of movement brushed at the corner of my vision, subtle enough that I might have ignored it. Something told me to look up. That's when I saw it. A figure was slowly sliding into view from the left side of the doorframe. It wasn't walking, more like drifting, its feet not touching the ground but hovering maybe half a meter above the floor. The size made no sense, taller than me but not adult tall, somewhere between 3 and 4.5 feet. It was shaped like a person but wrong. An aura shimmered around it, strange and unreal, a purplish glow, mixed with a shade of greenish gray, like celadone pottery. It wasn't bright enough to light the room, just enough to make the thing look separate from everything else, like it had been cut and pasted from another place. It wore clothes, formal even, purple trousers, a jacket, and black shoes. The outfit looked stiff, as if it belonged to another time. The figure itself was hunched slightly, its limbs bent as though frozen mid-motion. The arms were locked at its sides, elbows crooked, fingers spread wide and unnaturally rigid. The head was too large, out of proportion, covered with a mop of dark hair. I could make out ears that jutted sharply, and a nose long enough to cast its own shadow across a cheekbone. but the details blurred, as though my eyes weren't allowed to hold the face too long. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. I stared for 3 seconds, maybe less, though it stretched like an eternity. A chill rippled over me, tightening my skin. My stomach knotted, and every instinct screamed the same thing: don't move. Don't let it see you. I dropped my gaze back to the Lego bricks and pretended to play, hands fumbling across the plastic pieces. My thoughts raced. Maybe if I acted normal, it would pass me by. Maybe if I didn't acknowledge it, it would believe I hadn't seen. But the pull of curiosity was too strong. Against my better judgment, I let my eyes shift upward again, slowly, careful not to tilt my head. The figure was still there, halfway across the doorframe now, gliding in silence until it vanished from view, swallowed by the wall beyond. When it disappeared, the silence in my room grew unbearable. I sat frozen for what felt like forever before gathering the courage to bolt. My parents were downstairs watching TV, their laughter and voices floating up. I sprinted past the hallway without looking, down the stairs 2 at a time, and landed on the couch beside them, heart still hammering. I didn't say a word. Story 4. Grief has a taste. Bitter, metallic, like the back of your tongue after a night of crying into your pillow. That's the taste that sat in my mouth when Lilo died. She wasn't just a dog. She was the heartbeat in our house, the third body in our bed, the reason our mornings felt alive. A black pit bull with muscles cut like a goddamn athlete and a white star-shaped blaze on her chest. She was gorgeous, regal, even. The kind of animal strangers would stop and admire, and the kind of animal you couldn't help but spoil. She was ours for 13 years, and in that span, she became more than family. She was our child. But cancer doesn't give a fuck about family. She slowed down first. The long, bounding runs became limps. The stairs turned into Everest. The once eager appetite dulled into hesitation. We did what we could: supplements, warm blankets, endless strokes down her spine. But no matter how much love you pour into a dying body, you can't plug the leaks. The vet told us what we already knew. She was slipping, and all we could do was make the fall softer. Those last nights were brutal and holy. My wife and I lay beside her on the floor, whispering into her ears like children begging for a miracle. I'd rub her ears, kiss the top of her head, and sing, badly off-key but honest. "You're my shining star," I told her over and over. That white blaze wasn't just fur anymore. It was her symbol, her stamp on the universe, my fucking religion. When she stopped eating, we knew. That was her goodbye. That was her saying, "I'm done suffering. Let me go." We invited friends who had loved her like their own to come by. The vet came to the house so she wouldn't die on a cold metal table, but in her home, surrounded by the voices she knew. The moment she passed, it felt like someone had gutted me. One minute her chest rose, the next it didn't, and the silence in that space was obscene. I held her head in my lap and whispered, "Good girl, I love you always, forever." My wife sobbed against her side. And then she was gone. Just like that. The next day, I didn't want to exist. My body moved, but my mind was ash. My wife suggested we still go to see The Force Awakens. We had tickets reserved. It sounded absurd, but grief is strange. Sometimes distraction is the only way to keep breathing. So we went, sat in the dark with popcorn neither of us touched, and watched flashing lights and laser swords blur through tears. It didn't help. Every explosion on screen reminded me of her bark. Every dramatic score reminded me of her howl. My mind kept circling back to the feel of her fur under my palm as her body went slack. By the time we left, the movie could have been about anything. My only reality was absence. We got home late. For some reason, instead of going through the garage like usual, we came through the front door. My wife walked in behind me, then stopped. "Did you see that?" she asked. "What?" I muttered, numb. "There's a balloon. Outside." I blinked. "A balloon?" "Yeah," she said, pointing back toward the porch. "On the ground, right by the door." I stepped outside, and there it was, a shiny metallic mylar balloon in the shape of a star. Gold, catching the porch light like it was glowing from the inside. I picked it up, and the realization punched me straight in the chest. A star. My star. Lilo's star. My wife gasped when she saw my face. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks before I even knew they were coming. I held that balloon like it was her paw, like she'd sent it, one last gift, one last wink from whatever lay beyond. "I'm still here. Don't stop singing. Don't stop loving me." It didn't matter how it got there, whether it blew off from some party miles away, or whether a neighbor's kid lost hold of it. Rational explanations collapse under the weight of grief. For me, there was only one truth. Lilo sent it. Story 5. That morning, everything was normal, until it wasn't. I'd already washed my face, massaged in the serum, dabbed on eye cream with practiced fingers. My skin felt fresh. I grabbed my makeup bag, leaned toward the bathroom mirror, and froze. The face staring back at me wasn't mine. Or, it was mine, but decades too far along. My heart stuttered like I'd missed a step on a staircase. The reflection showed me in my 60s, sagging eyelids folded down heavy, crow's feet carving trenches into the corners of my eyes, deep lines bracketing my mouth. My forehead was marked with furrows like someone had dragged a chisel across it. The woman in the glass looked tired, worn thin by years, but she was me. I blinked hard, expecting the image to snap back like a bad trick of the light. Nothing changed. I leaned in, studying the older version of myself with the same curiosity and horror you'd give to a stranger caught rifling through your drawers. 10 full seconds ticked by. I could see the tiny quiver in her lip, the shadow under her chin, details too precise to dismiss as imagination. It was me, just not yet. Panic licked at the edges of my throat. I whipped my head to the side, staring at the tiled wall. When I finally forced myself to look back, my usual 30-something face had returned. Smooth enough, with only the faintest lines if I looked cruelly close. The shift was instant, jarring like someone flipping channels. I gripped the counter until my knuckles blanched. I'd just looked in this mirror minutes ago while washing my face. Everything had been normal. So what the hell had I seen? The logical part of my brain tried to line up excuses. Maybe the audiobook had distracted me, and my eyes had gone unfocused. Maybe steam from the shower warped the reflection. Maybe fatigue had played a trick. But my body knew better. My body remembered the adrenaline spike, the electric certainty that I'd glimpsed something real. It left me rattled in a way I couldn't shake. I found myself testing the mirror again and again that day, before leaving for work, after coming home, brushing my teeth at night. Each time, it was only me looking back. Still, the memory of that older face clung like a burr. Was it a glitch? Some tear in the veil between present and future? Or had I slipped sideways into another version of myself, an alternate timeline where time had marched further, faster? Story 6. I'd been getting ready to leave, makeup half done, hair not cooperating, music blasting through my AirPods while I moved from mirror to dresser and back again. The AirPods case sat right where I'd put it, on top of my neatly made bed, glaringly obvious against the dark blue sheets. White on navy. Unmissable. I remember glancing at it. It looked almost smug, waiting there like a promise that once I was done with eyeliner, I could scoop it up, snap it shut, and toss it into my bag. That was the plan. I turned around, literally for a second, to grab my eyeliner from the vanity. When I turned back, the case was gone. Not misplaced. Not nudged aside. Gone. I froze at first, blinking as though my eyes had blurred. Then I scanned the entire bedspread, every inch of that smooth, flat surface. Nothing. My brain scrambled for excuses. Maybe I'd picked it up absent-mindedly, maybe it slid, maybe I'd put it somewhere else. But no. I knew what I'd seen. I had placed it right there. Frustration hit like caffeine. I pulled the blanket back, shook out the pillows. Nothing. I went through the sheets again, inch by inch. I checked the floor even though my bed sits on storage drawers that touch the ground. There is no under the bed. I checked anyway, crawling on my hands and knees, as if I might find a secret crack in reality hiding beneath the frame. When that failed, I moved to desperation. I rifled through my dresser drawers, my closet, even the dirty laundry basket. I checked the pockets of jeans I hadn't worn in months. I shook out hoodies. I even dug through my sock drawer, as if the damn thing had teleported into rolled-up cotton. Still nothing. By then, my room looked like a crime scene. Every blanket was in the hallway, clothes scattered, drawers hanging open. My pulse was pounding with a cocktail of irritation and disbelief. I tore the room apart because I had to find it. I needed the satisfaction of snapping it shut, of proving to myself I wasn't losing my mind. But the case had vanished as completely as if it had never existed. The absurdity gnawed at me for the rest of the day. These weren't just any earbuds, they were part of my daily ritual. I used them for music while cleaning, for podcasts while cooking, for zoning out when I couldn't stand my own thoughts. They were my little portable escape hatch. Without the case, they were homeless, still usable but incomplete, like teeth without a jaw. That night I searched again, slower this time. I moved with the deliberate paranoia of someone who no longer trusted her own reality. I checked places I knew it couldn't be. The fridge, the bathroom cabinet, the pantry. Still nothing. Days turned into weeks. Each time I did laundry, I half expected the case to tumble out of a bedsheet, a sneaky stowaway. Each time I vacuumed, I imagined I'd hear the dull clunk of plastic against the nozzle. Every time I cleaned, I thought maybe I'd overlooked it, but it never came back. Story 7. The remote wasn't just a gadget, it was the key to my house. An old-school alarm system with a car-style fob, one button to arm, one to disarm. Convenient when you're stumbling through the door with luggage at midnight. Not the kind of thing you want to misplace. I'd been traveling for work, hopping hotels, juggling meetings, and that little black remote lived in my pocket the whole time. The keyring holder had snapped months earlier, so it never stayed with my actual keys. I kept it close, always in the same spot, because losing it wasn't just inconvenient. It meant coming home to a house I couldn't get into without punching the code like a burglar in my own living room. When I checked out of the hotel that Monday morning, I remember slipping it into my jeans pocket. At least, I thought I did. Hours later, when I finally rolled back into my driveway, bone-tired, the remote wasn't there. I dug into every pocket, checked my bag, my laptop case, even the floorboard of the car. Nothing. No problem, I told myself. I still had the code. I disarmed the alarm the old-fashioned way and shrugged it off. Maybe it had slipped into the lining of my bag. Maybe it had fallen behind the hotel nightstand. Either way, I'd sort it out later. Except I didn't. The next morning, I retraced my steps. I checked my jeans again, searched the dirty laundry pile, turned out the pockets until the seams strained. I emptied my computer bag onto the kitchen counter, rifled through chargers and pens and receipts. Nothing. The remote had vanished. By Sunday, I'd given up. I told myself I must have left it at the hotel. Maybe housekeeping had found it. Maybe it was already in a lost and found drawer next to chargers and wedding rings. I figured I'd call if I got desperate. For now, I just used the keypad and told myself to forget it. Then came Tuesday morning. I'd packed my clothes for another trip to Florida. Laundry done, bags ready. At 3 a.m., I dragged myself out of bed to watch a concrete pour before hitting the road. I pulled on the same jeans I'd worn days earlier, reached into the pocket, and there it was. The remote, sitting like it had never left. I froze, staring at it in the half-dark of my bedroom, the early morning silence pressing against my ears. My first thought was simple, impossible. I had checked these pockets. Not once, not twice, but obsessively, to the point of absurdity. There had been nothing there. Now suddenly it was back. I turned it over in my hand, half expecting to see some sign it wasn't mine. A crack, a scratch, anything. But no. Same remote. Same faint wear around the button. The same little nick near the edge where it once hit the garage floor. It was mine. Relief and unease hit me in the same breath. I had it back, but I couldn't explain it. Not in any way that made sense. It wasn't the first time something had disappeared in our house, though. My daughter's glasses had once vanished, only to reappear neatly folded on her bed. Tools went missing and reappeared days later in plain sight. We always joked about a house troll, some mischievous little presence that liked to borrow things and return them when it got bored. But the troll never traveled before. Things always came back within the walls of our house. This time, the remote had disappeared on the road, hundreds of miles away, and returned right here, right in my pocket. I stood there, jeans half-buttoned, staring at the thing like it might evaporate again. A part of me wanted to laugh, to chalk it up to fatigue and forgetfulness. Another part of me whispered something I didn't want to hear. What if it wasn't me? What if it wasn't forgetfulness at all? Story 8. It was the early 2000s, back when after-school bus rides stretched on forever, and every kid stared out the window, trying to find something interesting to look at between suburbs and strip malls. I was maybe 12, doped up on the low-dose Ritalin. Half the kids my age were prescribed back then. By that point in the day the stuff was wearing off, which meant my head wasn't foggy or distracted anymore. I was wide awake, restless, scanning the world outside. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the bus window, watching cars pass by in the opposite lane. The boulevard was always busy at that hour. Sedans, minivans, trucks. Adults gripping steering wheels, sometimes yelling into their giant brick-shaped cell phones. Ordinary people, ordinary moments. Nothing special. And then I saw it. An SUV, maybe a CRV or RAV4, one of those boxy little things, rolled up alongside us. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. It wasn't flashy. But then my eyes flicked to the driver's seat. Empty. No one had their hands on the wheel. No head over the seat back. Nothing. Just the steering wheel turning itself, guiding the car down the road like an invisible hand was at work. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe the driver had bent down to grab something? But from the bus, we sat higher up. If someone had leaned forward, I would have seen a shoulder, an arm, a movement. The seat was simply empty. That was when my eyes slid to the back seat. She was there. A woman pressed against the window, her entire torso twisted sideways, so she faced me directly. Her arms weren't raised, no waving or motion, just this eerie, unnatural posture, like her whole upper body had been shoved against the glass. Long, stringy black hair framed her face in tangled sheets. And the face itself blurred. Not pixelated, not smudged like my vision was failing, but wrong, as if the world hadn't finished sketching her features. She stared straight at me. Not at the bus. Not at the road. At me. Every muscle in my body went rigid. A bolt of cold shot through me, deeper than fear usually goes, the kind that sits in your gut and makes your breath hitch. My first thought was medication. This has to be the Ritalin. It's screwing with me. But no, my mind felt too sharp, too awake. The car kept pace with us for maybe 5 seconds, though it stretched in my memory like a lifetime. The bus hummed and rattled, kids talked and laughed around me, but all of that blurred out. There was only the SUV, driverless, and the woman with the blurred face. And then it slid past, gone into the stream of traffic, leaving me staring after it with my heart jackhammering. I didn't tell anyone. Not the kid next to me, not my parents later. What would I say? Hey, I saw a ghost hitching a ride in a car with no driver. They'd laugh, tell me it was the meds, or that I'd dozed off. And maybe that would have been easier to believe. But the memory stuck. Story 9. High school is lonely enough without reality itself turning against you. I wasn't one of the popular kids, not even close. Most of my classmates thought I was weird, quiet, awkward, never quite in step with their conversations. That day, we were called into the seniors' classroom to watch a chemistry experiment, something flashy with colored flames meant to impress us. I didn't care much. I brought my phone with me, planning to text a friend if things got boring. I remember holding it in my hand, sending one quick message before slipping it closed. The weight of it was solid, reassuring. I was used to keeping it close, my little lifeline. When you don't have many friends nearby, the person on the other end of that screen becomes your anchor. I kept the phone resting in my palm, fingers curled lightly around it while my attention drifted toward the experiment. A few minutes passed. Then I glanced back down. The phone was gone. Not slipped. Not dropped. Not nudged to the side. Just gone, while my hand still lay in the same position, as if I were gripping air. Confusion hit first. I turned my hand over, stared at my empty palm, then looked around my chair. Nothing. I bent down, checked under the desk. No sign of it. My stomach began to tighten. I asked a couple of students nearby if they'd seen me drop it. They shook their heads. One of them even laughed, thinking I was joking. Panic began to creep in. I asked them to call my number. They did, more than once. No ring, no buzz, no glow from under a desk or across the room. It was as though the phone had been swallowed whole by the air. I searched everywhere. My desk, my bag, the floor. I even checked the hallway outside the classroom, just in case I'd absent-mindedly left it there earlier, though I knew I hadn't. The phone had been in my hand. I was sure of it. 15 minutes crawled by like hours. I tried to focus on the experiment, but all I could think about was the missing phone. The heat of embarrassment crept up my neck too. Everyone could see me frantically searching, and some of them smirked at my desperation. To them, it probably looked like another weird moment. To me, it felt like reality itself was mocking me. When the experiment ended and we returned to our own classroom, I trudged back to my desk, resigned to the idea that I'd lost it for good. Buying a new one would be impossible. I didn't have the money, and my parents would have been furious. I lifted the lid of my desk, already knowing it was empty. Except it wasn't. There, sitting neatly inside, was my phone. Right in the center. My stomach dropped. I froze, staring at it like it was a bomb waiting to go off. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The screen lit, showing 3 missed calls, the ones my classmates had made earlier. The blood drained from my face. The desk had been empty when I checked before. I was sure of it. I'd searched it thoroughly, even pulled everything out to prove it wasn't hiding. Now the phone was back, quietly waiting, like it had never left. I wanted to accuse someone of a prank, but it didn't add up. No one was close enough to slip it from my hand without me noticing, and no one had access to my desk during that experiment. Besides, most of them didn't even talk to me, let alone orchestrate something so elaborate. I slipped the phone into my pocket, trying to act calm, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Relief mingled with unease. I was glad to have it back, but nothing about it made sense. The experience haunted me for weeks.